Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Week 2 class for Purposive Communication. Once again, I am your instructor, Shalel Bilionis. And for today, I decided not to turn on my camera because actually I'm not feeling well. But anyway, we'll just get this started. So for today's lesson, we'll be talking about communication and globalization. And in the second part, we will be learning more about globalization and local communication in multicultural settings. So before we delve deeper into these topics, we are going to answer first this question. What does it mean to say that a language is global? I want you to think about your answer for that. All right. Okay, so I guess you already had answers in your mind. So a language becomes global if it is spoken and understood by majority of the population in almost every region of the world. So in this case, based from its definition, we can say that English is a global language because it's not only spoken by the native speakers, but a lot of people coming from different parts of the world know how to speak it. So therefore, we can say that English is the global language. And why did it happen? Well, if we're going to go back to our history, we will learn that back in the 18th century, the British Empire had colonized different countries from all parts of the world. And along with that so-called colonization, they bring with them their language. And that's why a lot of countries nowadays can speak English very well. And of course, that includes us, right? Okay, now let's talk about the term globalization. From the word global, what do we mean by that? Actually, according to Griffin and Bone 2014, globalization is originally an economic concept. It refers to the processes through which local and regional ideas, products, and practices are transformed into worldwide ideas, products, and practices. What do we mean by that? For example, in the Philippines, we do have our own local products. Say, for example, we have copper products. So out of these local products, we try to export them to different countries. And different countries will try to make other products out of them, and it will be available not only to the local market, but all around the world. So it will become available to the worldwide market. So that's why it is known to be globalization. Now, another meaning is that globalization is the process by which people and goods move easily across borders. That is true, right? So that's why it's called globalization, because different products are being transported, being imported to different parts of the world. So for example, in our case, we are sometimes importing chocolates, for example, from other countries. So that's an example of globalization. All right. Now, how did globalization happen? Well, this concept has actually started even back in 130 BCE to 1453 CE, during the establishment of the Silk Road. What is Silk Road? It is actually an ancient network of trade routes that was established during the Han Dynasty of China. So this Silk Road became their international trade routes during that time, connecting China to Far East countries and even to European countries and in the Middle East, right? So if you can see here, this is the road where they are traveling if they want to transport and import products from China and to China. Okay, now in today's world, globalization still happens, and it's a lot and a way easier than before. If you have noticed here, just by logging into your phones, your iPads, your tablets, or your laptops, globalization can happen. For example, if you are an online seller, right? You'll just log into your application, shopping application, for example, and there you go. By clicking your finger, you can sell your product to people from different parts of the world. Same is true when you are buying products. Just by logging on to an application where you can shop to different parts of the world, you can definitely do that. And globalization again occurs just by doing that, simple as it is. Right. What are the impacts of globalization on communication? Well, first off, globalization increases business opportunities. For example, there's a lot of multinational companies right now who hire employees that are located in different countries. So if they want to meet, if they want to talk, converse with, in terms of planning or improving their products, they can just do that even by logging into Zoom applications, for example, or other online platforms. And also, like I mentioned earlier, if you are an online seller, you have increased business opportunities in a way that you are selling your product not just in the local market, but in the worldwide market as well. So, globalization has really a big impact in terms of business. And along with that, communication also happen, right? Because when you are transacting your business, you are also communicating to different people. And unconsciously, you are not just, should I say, transporting your products, but you are also carrying along with you your language, right? And that language, of course, is English, because that's the dominant language that people are using from different parts of the world. Next off, we do have remove cultural barriers. Well, a lot of people would say that culture is the root of communication challenges, right? But actually, globalization has made it possible to somehow remove cultural barriers. For example, a person in Japan would be able to understand how someone in the United States goes about their day, right? How? Just by looking at the television shows and movies, cultural barriers are becoming less prevalent. Okay. And if you constantly talk and communicate to different people having different culture, you would be able to understand them better. You would be able to understand their practices and their culture as well. Okay, next off, it tries to develop a global village. Well, actually, the term or phrase, rather, global village, that was coined by theorist Marshall McLuhan, right? So why global village? According to him, global village happens, or it is created, when distance and isolation does not matter anymore, because people are connected by digital means or by technology. For example, if you want to enroll in a university, in a famous university, well, you don't have to really go to that university, because you can just enroll even if you are staying in your own home country. You can enroll to Harvard, for example, through their open university, through online means. So you are trying to remove distance in this case, because you are trying to connect people from different parts of the world through technology. And of course, more language contact happens. Yes, this is true. Like I said earlier, if there's globalization, language occurs as well. Language contact happens. And with that, globalization definitely can affect communication. Okay, next. What about local and global communication in multicultural settings? Is what you can see here. Through globalization and through communication globally, we can be able to collaborate with each other, no matter what race or nationality you belong to. Okay. And we usually do that. We Filipinos are fond of doing that because we are very friendly to people from different countries, right? Now, talking about multiculturalism, it's but prim and proper for us to discuss what it is. It's actually the way in which a society deals with cultural diversity, both at the national and at the community level. So, we do have different culture. Multi means many, right? And culture means, different practices, or practices, a set of practices, belief of a certain group of people in a certain land, all right, in a certain region. So multiculturalism does not only happen in the worldwide level. In the Philippines, multiculturalism is present even at the community level and even at the national level. In the province of Negros Occidental, for example, people are speaking different dialects, Hiligaynon and Cebuano, and of course, in each town or in each city, unconsciously, we do have practices that are somehow different from other cities in the province. So multiculturalism happen if you are trying to deal with people having different or with diverse with diverse culture. Okay, so that's multiculturalism. Now, what do we mean by global and local communication in multicultural settings? So, we can communicate to other people in multicultural settings if we understand that we coexist with people from diverse or different cultural backgrounds, beliefs, religion, gender, nationalities, religion, and ethnicity. Understanding the fact that we coexist means that we need to try to respect them. Though we have our very own set of beliefs, but we should try to, respect their practices, their beliefs. For example, if that person has a different religion, of course, that means that they have different practices that's set apart from what we do have. So understanding their practices and beliefs, would bring to a better communication. Why? If you're blocking yourself in understanding their practices, you would not be able to communicate effectively. You would not be able to learn from them because in the first place, you are trying to block yourself out with their opinions because of the fact that they differ from your opinion. You know what I'm saying? Okay, next. We can interact better in multicultural settings if we have to understand that verbal and nonverbal communication varies from one culture to another. Say, for example, right, the shaking of hands in United States. Shaking of hands is very common, especially if you greet or if you meet someone on that day. So that's their nonverbal gesture to show, yeah, we are friends, we're okay, right? We agree on something. That's their gesture to do that. But in Japan, for example, their nonverbal communication is different because they bow, right? Whenever they meet someone. Okay, another example is, of course, nodding. Nodding is also different in different cultures. Say, for example, in the Philippines, in America, for example, nodding means yes. But in other countries, such as Greece, Syria, and Turkey, for them, nodding means no. So when you communicate in a multicultural context, it is very important for you to acknowledge, for you to understand the various communications and behavioral patterns of that culture that you are interacting with. Through that, you'll be able to understand each other better. Okay. Next part, we have to understand. Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. Now, second part, we have to understand that if you are in a multicultural setup, you have to develop intercultural communication skills. And these skills were emphasized by Volpe and others, 2001. First one is your ability to express understandable and culturally sensitive thoughts, feelings, opinions, and expectations. But you have to express it in a way that you're not disrespecting other people. Because if you do that, communication will definitely not happen. Instead, it might cause, a war between you and that other person. Okay. Next, ability to engage and immerse in the local culture and language. Being able to be flexible enough to engage in different local culture and language is not easy. It's not a walk in the park. It takes courage and at the same time patience. But if you do that, it will bring a fruitful result on your part. Next is the ability to establish shared meanings with the local people to avoid stereotyping and miscommunication. What do we mean by this? If you're communicating in a multicultural setup, you have to also let them know of some of your behavioral patterns in your culture. For example, if you are in Syria, as I mentioned earlier, and you're communicating with them, and of course if you nod, that that would lead to misunderstanding on their part, that you're saying yes. All right, that you're saying no instead of yes, because for them, again, nodding means no, but for you, nodding means yes. So it is better if you are going to establish shared meanings. You have to let them know that in my country, nodding means yes and nodding means no. And it's also better to do what the second ability mentioned, that you have to engage and immerse in their culture. So if for them nodding means no, so you try to adapt it, right? You try to adopt and adapt. You know what I'm saying? Okay, next, ability to develop a language capacity, such as using local greetings and opportunities to use the local language in other contexts. Okay, so if you are new to another land, to a foreign land, you have to somehow at least master the basics of their greetings, right? And some of the basic language that they are using. Okay. And of course, ability to empathize with how the locals see the world. Empathy right now is not common to many people. But if you try to empathize, people would also empathize back to you if you need it, right? And empathy would lead to a better communication. All right. Now, let's move on to how to communicate effectively in a global society. What should you do? So first off, it's better that you try to express your ideas effectively in verbal, nonverbal, and written forms in either digital or non-digital environment, or both. Expressing your ideas effectively would lead to better communication, whether that is through digital or non-digital means. Okay, so expressing ideas also entails that you try to understand the culture of that people or of that person, because it's very important, so that you would be able to understand each other. Next, use effective listening skills to evaluate arguments and rationalize judgments and improve job effectiveness and work relationship. Listening is Very important. Listening leads to better communication, and of course, it leads to better relationship. If you're not a good listener, communication will definitely not happen. All right. Okay. Next, communicate with purpose to a variety of audiences. So you have to know first, like we mentioned on our week one lesson, communicating with purpose is one of the principles that we need to consider when we are having oral communication. So you need to know why in the first place you're communicating with that person. All right. Next, promote collaboration and cooperation with each other. Okay, so this is self-explanatory. It's very important to collaborate and to cooperate. Number 5, we have to understand the concept of diversity and promote respect all the time. Okay, we have to understand that people come from different countries, and along with them, they do have practices and culture that are super different from ours. So we have to understand them. There's a saying, sometimes it's better to be kind than to be right, right? So if you don't understand what they're doing, just be kind enough to respect what they're doing, even though you think it's not right. Okay. All right. Next, use technology and social media responsibly. Okay. There are a lot of people who would bash people from other parts of the world without realizing that those people that they're bashing are humans as well who have feelings. We have to use social media responsibly, not in a way that we would degrade other people. Okay. All right. Now, what are the tips that we need to bear in mind when you're communicating in a multicultural context? First, we have to avoid asking inappropriate or personal questions. A lot of people create mistakes in this part because for them, it's just okay. It's just okay to ask personal questions. No, it's actually not, unless you're super friends. So if there is one thing that you do not understand in their practices, it's better to establish good relationship first, okay, before you can ask inappropriate questions and personal and confidential question. Avoid doing that. Second, stereotyping or generalizing certain groups. Keep an open mind and be flexible. What is stereotyping? Well, actually, it is defined as creating a standard mental picture toward a certain group of people, right? Like you already have a prejudiced opinion or view about that group of people. So, for example, Black male athletes, are often believed to be more athletic. Yet, a lot of people would stereotype them to be less intelligent compared to their white male counterparts. In the local setting, for example, some would say that Cebuano-speaking people are not going into fashion, right? Some people would say that. Like they have even the term udang, right? But that's not actually true. So we have to avoid stereotyping other people, no matter what culture they belong to, no matter what gender they belong to, race, nationality, religion. Instead, we have to be flexible. We have to be open-minded, and we have to recognize that we have different practices. We have different beliefs, but what's important is that we understand each other. Okay. Next part, we have to avoid using jargons, cliches, highfalutin terms, technical terms, acronyms, and gender biased language. So, for example, if you are in the medical field and you are just talking to a layman, say layman, like ordinary person, you try to you try to avoid using technical terms that they cannot understand. And instead, you try to simplify it so that effective communication will take place. All right. Next, we have to try to be sensitive, be polite, be respectful, be tactful at all times. And you have to learn and understand the value of diversity. Okay, I guess that's self-explanatory. And we have to develop intercultural communication skills, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, and of course, you have to eliminate gender-biased words or sexist language, particularly in writing. Later on, we'll know the different gender-biased words and sexist language that we have to avoid. Okay, next, we have to request him or her to repeat the message or simplify it in case you do not understand the message conveyed by the person you're communicating with. If there is a question in your mind that you cannot understand it very well, it is better to ask that person so as to avoid miscommunication. Okay? Next, we have to learn and observe physical distance or space in dealing with other people. Of course, right now, in the midst of pandemic, we have to observe social distancing. Okay, but regardless whether there's pandemic or not, we have to avoid, being too close when we're talking. Because in some cultures, for example, shaking hands and hugging, or even kissing on the cheeks for friends, they are deemed to be inappropriate, especially for some Middle East countries, right? So we have to observe physical distance and space whenever we're talking. And we have to listen attentively. I guess I already mentioned this. Listening is very important. The Bible even said you should be quick in listening than in speaking, because, listening effectively will lead to effective and efficient communication. Next, observe patience in listening to other people's ideas, which may not be the same as yours. You have to be very patient. We have to understand them, try to understand them, although their ideas might not be the same as our ideas, your ideas. Next, pay attention to their nonverbal communication. And you have to understand, like I said earlier, you have to understand that in every culture, we have different nonverbal communication. So you have to pay attention to that, and you have to learn the basics of that. Respect a person's right to confidentiality and privacy. Okay, that's self-explanatory. We have to be considerate with them. We have to speak politely and gently to other people. We have to stay calm and cool and composed when you make a mistake or feel embarrassed by others. Like when you make a mistake, do not cram. You have to understand that we are all imperfect. Every day we commit mistake, whether in speaking, whether in writing, or in any other aspect of our lives. We all make mistake. So if ever you did a mistake, just be cool, be composed, do not overreact. Okay? All right. Now, next, we have to make positive interpretations of the actions and words of other people. Do not automatically be negative on what they said or on the actions that they had manifested. Instead, we should try to understand. There's a saying, mature people are always trying to understand. They do not try to look at the surface. Instead, they try to delve deeper behind the actions of other people. So be mature enough in interpreting positively the actions and words of other people. Next, when you feel strange or uncomfortable about something being communicated by other people, you try to request them to clarify their meanings and intentions. Okay, before you misunderstood them, you have to clarify it first. All right, now, like I mentioned earlier, it is important that we have to avoid gender biased words or sexist language. Now, what are those gender biased words that we have to avoid, especially in writing or even in speaking? Okay, so first off, we have to avoid the word chairman because of the word man right here, right? So instead, it's better just to use chair or chairperson. That refers to both men and women. Salesman, okay, you change it into salesperson. This is okay. This is right. Congressman, you can say legislator. Spokesman, spokesperson, not man. Okay. Foreman, you can change it to supervisor. Stewardess, right? You can change it into, what do you think? Yeah, flight attendant. All right. What else? Waitress, right? You can use the word server in a restaurant. Policeman, again, you have that man. All right. Just change it into police officer. Okay, fireman into firefighter. Man-made, all right, that's a man-made thing, all right? You can change it to manufacturer. Businessman into business executive. I think this is better, right? Manpower to workforce. Okay, now it's very important that we try to avoid gender biased words or sexist language because in today's world, we're trying to promote equality between men and women, right? So even in the use of such words, they're just, they're just words, but they can create a big impact to other people. Okay. Now, how can we avoid gender biased language? Here are the tips. First one, we have to substitute gender biased pronouns with articles or determiner. So for example, every employee is entitled to his 13th month pay. So does that mean it's only for men in that organization, in that company? No, you're also referring to women employees of that certain company. So it's better to say every employee is entitled to a 13th month pay. Okay, so you changed his, right? You deleted this. Instead, you replaced it with an article, right? Every employee is entitled to a 13th month pay. Okay, next, use plural nouns instead of singular pronouns. For example, each employee must submit his proposal next week. Again, you have the word his here. We have to avoid this one. So instead of singular pronouns, we can change it into all employees must submit their proposal next week. Okay, so we change plural nouns into we use plural nouns rather instead of singular pronouns. Okay, next, use either or pronouns, he or she, his or her, his or hers. However, we have to avoid putting men first all the time. So for example, every applicant must fill out his own application form. You can do it like this. Every applicant must fill out his or her own application form. But we have to understand, not throughout your text, you're always putting men first. You can just use fill out her or his, or on the other sentence, you can say his or her. So avoid putting men first all the time in this aspect. Okay. 4, use second person pronoun you or your over third person pronoun he or she. And you have to be very careful not to change the meaning of the sentence. Okay, for example, the sales manager should prepare his marketing proposal for a new product. So instead of his here, you can change it into you should prepare your marketing proposal for a new product. In this case, it's okay because you are talking probably in this case to the sales manager. But again, you have to be very careful not to change the meaning of the statement. Next, you have to use appropriate titles. It's very necessary, especially if you're writing a letter. For example, if you don't know a known addressee, like you happen not to know the person who will be receiving that letter, you avoid using only sir, because maybe that person is a woman. So instead, it is better to use dear sir or madam. And then you have to put a colon over there if it's a noun. Or you can say attention and then HR manager. In this case, it's non-sexist, right? Especially if you don't know who will be receiving the letter. Okay, so I guess that covers everything, and I hope to see you again and see you on our next lesson. Thank you so much and take care. Goodbye.